All right, everyone, it's time for the occult video number 421. Church and state are fundamentally the same thing. This is something that I thought of last night, actually. I was thinking to myself, separation of church and state. Wise idea. This ties into the 4th of July, of course. The idea is that the state would not incept a specific church, which was originally something that was intended by some of the founders. The idea was that the United States, in its formation, would have an official religion, not just Christianity. Of course, back then they didn't just say Christianity. They would say, like, you know, one branch or another, Catholic, Protestant, whatever it happened to be. We're going to be a bunch of Puritans now, something along those lines. The idea was to separate the church and state for very obvious fundamental reasons. Because church and state don't mix well. They had been, of course, mainly of English extraction. They had dealt with the concept of the non-separation of these two entities and found it to be a recipe for tyranny. But then I thought to myself, don't they fundamentally function the same? This is why separation of church and state is wise, because they compound one another. The church, if you believe in their teachings, if you are an adherent, can punish you because if you step out of line and don't do what the church prescribes you as being supposed to do, they can threaten you with hellfire or some other form of punishment. And of course, before the rights of man and so forth, often that punishment was physical as well. Yeah, yeah, we decided to burn you because we think that you're a witch. There's too much witch's butter growing on your property. You must be practicing evil magic. By the way, witch's butter is apparently edible, but I wouldn't probably myself bother to eat it because it looks gelatinous and weird and it grows all over the place over in the woodlot, coincidentally. But it doesn't look terribly palatable to me. Apparently, though, you can eat it as a survival food, I suppose, if you really want to. The state punishes you in the temporal sense. So if you step out of line, the state will put you in jail or torture you in some cultures or hang you or something like that. I was thinking to myself, fundamentally, these two things are basically the same. Now, by church, I mean organized religion, especially state incepted. I don't mean spirituality. If I want to punish somebody, I do it through various spiritual means, but I don't torture them. I don't hang them. I don't threaten them with a good time in hell or something like that. Just a little bit different. And of course, I'm just one particular, well, temporally, just one particular individual. But the church and state, fundamentally on that level, they operate effectively the same way. The founders, who were wise and generally irreligious, they did not go to church. They believed in God. They believed in the Christian God. Every single one of them, I believe. And occasionally some of them went to church. But Benjamin Franklin, he was too busy dicking down French whores. And, George Washington was too busy making whiskey and going to the ballroom to dance with the pretty girls. Jefferson was too busy boffing his slaves and, and thinking about UFOs, actually. Apparently had a great interest in astronomical subjects. So they weren't particularly religious individuals. I think what they basically fundamentally realized is that if the state and the church are both punishing the goddamn population and they're doing it hand in hand, then that's a recipe for massive corruption. If the government is capable of effectively controlling people's spiritual actions, their spiritual beliefs, and people can't, pray their conscience, it would be a problem. If you can vote your conscience, you should also be able to pray your conscience or not pray at all or not vote at all. Voting was never made compulsory. There's a reason for that as well. Some people have suggested this. That's a terrible idea. Do you really want uninformed individuals who are too ambivalent to even care, who otherwise wouldn't vote, to actually go to the ballot box? My quick answer, of course, to that is no. So this is kind of a civic thing as much as it is a spiritual thing when you think about it, because the church and state operate on the same basis. Also, they're equally corrupt. The church can judge you for some spiritual crime that you may not have committed. Or maybe 100 years later, they change their mind on whether it's a spiritual crime or not at all. The state has done the same thing throughout time. And this is in a nation which has a rather tempered and laid back system, generally speaking, although becoming more and more legalistic, unfortunately. And in the fire and brimstone era and in the televangelist era, certainly more moralistic on the religious end. We come and go in waves with regards to these things. The state can, for example, punish somebody for a crime they did not commit. The church can punish somebody for a sin that they did not commit. They can threaten them though, and because the adherent believes in it, of course, they believe themselves to be punished, and then the church usually asks for money. The government does the same thing. The government will come in, accuse you of a crime, and you'll have to shell out enormous amounts trying to defend yourself and or pay a fine, court fees, and all of these other things, even if you did not do anything wrong. They are both fundamentally corrupt edifices, number one, and they are both fundamentally to be constrained, number two. The church to be constrained by the Constitution from directly interfering with people's lives. Somebody voluntarily wants to adhere to their services and shit like that, whatever, you have the right to do that. And the state is also constrained by the Constitution, at least in theory. In principle, it's supposed to be constrained as some of us have unfortunately found out, especially with the judiciary, that's not necessarily the case. We've seen this on the news multiple times with regards to the separation of powers, for example. It happens all the time, unfortunately. Just look at the suspension of habeas corpus under Lincoln, or pretty much everything FDR did. Yeah, including those concentration camps. So the church and state are fundamentally identical, actually. Um, they operate in the exact same capacity. It's just the methodology is different. And over time, the methodology has changed. Of course, again, the church no longer burns heretics. Now they simply say, you're going to hell because you did the wrong thing. And synagogues and imams in their mosques and shit like that, temples, they do fundamentally the same thing as well. Cults operate on the same basis, actually. You have voluntarily joined the cult, that the leader will say, hey, you'll be thrown by the wayside on a highway road with no money if you step out of line. Or, hey, yeah, we're going to beat you to death, or something like that. It's the same exact thing. By the way, there's no difference between a cult and a religion anyway, except the acceptance of the state authority, which is very, very funny in colloquial parlance. That's about all. Peace out.